It's Friday, February 17th. Let's talk PlayStation. So I only have 3 quick little news stories to talk about with you guys this week, but they're certainly very good ones. Like this one, Crash Bandicoot, the Insane Trilogy, now has a release date, and that is June 30th. I thought this was pretty pertinent information because I know a lot of people want to get to playing this. So we can expect it to come June 30th, and as we already kind of knew, I believe we actually were told prior about this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the game is going to be releasing at a budget price. So, for example, in America, it's going to be releasing at $39.99, which is great. Getting all 3 Crash games on the original PlayStation. Games completely remastered, completely done from the ground up. Even the the audio and the visual, the audio and the soundtrack is being touched up quite nicely, and it's Crash Bandicoot. We'll finally get to play a somewhat modern version of Crash Bandicoot. Now let's talk about something we probably haven't talked about in a very long time, well over a year at this point. We now have an update, a semi-indirect update about Deep Down. Do you remember this? Deep Down was announced at the PlayStation 4 reveal event in 2013 of February. It was it's Capcom dungeon crawler sort of game for PlayStation 4. It's exclusive. And we hadn't heard about it for the longest time. The last update we got was in 2015. This is when Capcom was kind of telling us that the game was actually taking a bit of a different direction, so it might take a little bit longer. So anyway, the information we have about it is that Capcom has filed a new trademark for the game, and not necessarily one to replace the old trademark. They still have that. This is a completely new trademark, but it is still for Deep Down. So that might tell us that the game is, well, alive, and that is the last update we had, is that it's alive, and that it's very much so being worked on. But the fact that the last time we were told that it's still being worked on, they said, oh, well, we're kind of going in a different direction. It's a big budget video game. You start building a game completely from the ground up. You go in one direction, you think, oh, it's not really working out. Let's take it into an entirely new direction. You got to figure that's adding a few good years onto the game's development cycle. So it's probably going to be a very long time still until we see it, again. Or maybe the new trademark is an indication that we will see it pop up again soon. Either way, we're 3 going on to 4 years now with the PlayStation 4. And this game that was at the reveal event is still MIA. Like the one other game that we've just recently got from that reveal event was The Witness. The Witness was there on for the PS4 initial announcement. We hadn't seen that for the longest time until that finally came out. So high hopes for Deep Down. I still think it looks pretty cool. So I'm optimistic. Now here's some not optimistic news, some actually pretty telling news for sure. Maybe you've seen this one already. So PlayStation Now is getting discontinued for a number of different devices. Sony is reshifting their focus with PlayStation Now, and they're focusing purely on PlayStation 4 and PC. Those are going to be the only 2 platforms you'll be able to play PlayStation Now on very soon. On August 15th, 2017, they are ceasing PlayStation Now service on all Sony Blu-ray players, all Samsung TVs, 2013, 2014, 2015 Sony Bravia TV models, PlayStation Vita, which is also a pretty specific one, kind of a big one, and PlayStation 3 as well. And then come April 1st, you won't be able to do PlayStation Now on any 2016 model Sony Bravia TVs. So, like I said, pretty telling news. And what's telling about this is, so right away you kind of look at this and you go, okay, this isn't good, right? This is doom and gloom. And certainly it's always kind of had that perception because PlayStation Now already has such a bad sort of negative connotation with it, because a lot of people are openly admit they don't want to play games that way in terms of streaming the entire game from start to finish and running into lag and connection issues and things like that. People still don't have a proper internet connection. Most homes don't to sustain playing PlayStation Now, and some people just don't want to be in that sort of place. Like, the world's just kind of not really ready for it, PlayStation Now is still kind of too soon, and despite that fact, Sony is still pretty persistent in constantly adding new games to the service, and I guess part of the reason why they're doing that is because they are pretty set in stone that they are not doing backwards compatibility for PlayStation 4. I know this is something that keeps coming up whenever there's a news story about PlayStation Now. You'll see a bunch of people in the comments going, we just want backwards compatibility, and of course this argument and this drum is getting beat even harder and harder because Microsoft has been great at adding more and more games to the backwards compatible Xbox One, which they are doing software emulation. And we talked about this a very long time ago when Microsoft initially announced that, and I gave them so much praise for announcing that because I knew right away that was actually probably a very difficult thing for Microsoft to pull off, and I had said at the time that was going to be a gradual thing for them. They were not going to turn on a light switch, and all 360 games are now playable on Xbox One. It took years for them to get these amount of titles, because each title has to be tested and thoroughly, run through to make sure that the game runs properly and everything, because a lot of times console manufacturers can have some pretty strict QA, and that's why they don't just turn on a switch for software emulation and let everything just run like garbage. They test each title and make sure it works. I gotta hand it to Microsoft, they did a great job there. Sony has already openly admitted plenty of times they don't want to do that, and even more so they've kind of admitted that it's almost borderline impossible. And I can totally see that. The PlayStation 3 is uses the cell processor. Emulating it on a PlayStation 4 sounds, I would have to assume, absolutely impossible. Emulating a PlayStation 3 on an extremely powerful PC today, you still get very poor results, and it's very hard to do, and there's not much success in emulating PlayStation 3. So to expect it to be done on PlayStation 4, I think is a little bit bizarre. I don't know why people have this somewhat unrealistic expectation. But going back to the topic of PlayStation Now, yeah, this isn't all that great, but you gotta figure they've never talked numbers about people that are subscribed to the service, right? So they're obviously not very happy about how many people are actively using it, but you have to figure there's like next to nobody doing it on TVs and Blu-ray players, probably less on PlayStation 3 for sure, because that is the native console where you can just buy discs and play them there. PlayStation Vita, that just based off the fact that the PlayStation Vita only has such a small install base, tells you right away there's not that many people that are going to be using the service on PlayStation Vita. And even hardcore owners of Vita, ideally they don't really like playing full console games on it either. Yeah, you can do the remote play with PS4, and yeah, you could do PlayStation Now, but the button mapping and everything, and the fact that the text sometimes just looks far too small because console picture does not transfer well to that small screen. It's not the most ideal situation. So I think even if you are a hardcore Vita owner, you probably weren't using it. So that makes sense. Pretty much all the services they did discontinue, I can't really fault them for it. At the same time, it's not like, they're not talking numbers, and there's a reason for it, because they're definitely not psyched about what's going on. But Sony's a big business, so they just kind of figure, why the hell would we keep supporting TVs for crying out loud? Why would we keep supporting Blu-ray players? Like, cut it off there. Whatever that cost was, just get rid of it, because clearly that's not going to have people. People aren't going to be up in arms about not being able to use PlayStation Now on their 2013 Sony Bravia. So where does that leave PlayStation Now in the future? I'm not sure. Like I said, it's ahead of its time. People just don't feel comfortable doing something like this. And this isn't the first time that Sony has done something that was like too ahead of their time. One pretty notable example is PSP Go, which was a system that only accepted digital downloads from the PlayStation Store, so all UMDs that you had bought on your PSP were totally useless. Sony didn't have any sort of upgrade or transfer program for your physical games. It was strictly a PSP that was download only, and that was even years back. If you did something like that today, I still think that's too soon. So that device was way ahead of its time. Sony likes to do things, and a lot of the times it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but I think this was kind of a long game for Sony. I think they're still pretty committed to PlayStation Now. I think they're still going to, stick to their guns and add more and more games to the service. I think it will get to the point where they start adding PlayStation 2 games to the service, because I think they know down the line, if they stick to it, it's going to be, a decade later on PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 6, because moving forward, you'd have to assume you've got full compatibility now because of the x86 architecture and PS4 Pro upgrade cycles. We've talked about that, right? So when you formulate that sort of idea of 10 years down the line, where starting at this console generation everything is natively compatible, you can have PlayStation Now as the one little shining light to take care of those other three platforms behind it. But what do I know? I'm just speculating. Those are all the news stories I want to talk about with you guys this week. And we're on our new Let's Play, Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. This will be really good. I'm starting to go through it again. It's great, loving it. I'm realizing I feel like we're going to spend a lot of time playing this one, because Uncharted 2 can be particularly long, and it's got a lot of cutscenes and stuff like that. And you know how I like to talk during all those Let's Plays. So I might end up making those parts a little bit longer, which I'm sure most of you don't mind, at least the people that consistently watch those. It still shocks me that you actually want to listen to the shit I have to say. Not sure why you do it, but God bless you. Wackiest bless you. Not really sure why I make Pokemon references. The channel's full on PlayStation. I tweet about Pokemon a lot, and it's just like, I know literally the only people that watch me or care about me or listen to the things I have to say, it's only because of PlayStation. So whenever I make any sort of reference to Pokemon, it's like, it's over everybody's head. But hey, I still love you. Alright, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Bandicoot. Thank you all so much for talking with me. I'll see you all next Friday.